everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, a panel discussion on the down and dirty of gender bias. My name is Anita Patel, and I'm the co-founder of Digital Page. For those of you who don't know Digital Page, we are a nonprofit with the mission of changing the face of technology. And we look to do that by empowering women and underrepresented genders to not only pursue careers within technology, but also become tomorrow's design-minded digital leaders. And with that, we are so excited to be able to have curated this amazing panel of technology leaders to join us and have a conversation, a real conversation around this topic. I'm really excited about hearing everything that these leaders have to say. But before we jump into that, I want to give you just a quick rundown of housekeeping items. We are currently streaming to multiple platforms. So I do encourage you to drop comments in the chat, as well as share your questions for our leaders, and we'll take those questions towards the end of this discussion. A highlight, Digital Page loves to give out spotlight lunches, and a spotlight lunch is essentially a virtual mentoring opportunity. These are 1-hour opportunities where you really get the opportunity to have a conversation with the leader on whatever topic best fits your needs, whether it's academic, whether it's career advancement, or just more knowledge about their area of expertise. So for today, we're going to be able to give away a spotlight lunch with your choice of one of our panelists, along with a $20 gift card to cover your costs for the lunch. So definitely drop those comments, ask those questions, because anybody that does will be automatically entered to win that spotlight lunch. That being said, I'm going to hand it off to Rashmili Vimula, who is our Director of Operations and moderator for this panel event. Rashmili.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Amita, thank you for the great kickoff. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As Amita said, my name is Rashmili Vimula. I am on the Digital Page leadership team, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Just a quick intro about myself. I've had a traditional career path into technology. I did computer science, graduated in 2015 from Clemson, and went the path of going into technical roles in my career up until the end of 2020, where I was given the opportunity to try my hand at marketing. Quite the switch, unexpectedly. But now I am the strategic marketing manager at Kingsman Software, where I'm establishing and leading marketing, recruiting, and employee experience. But that's enough about me. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our powerhouse crew of panelists this afternoon. You might have seen their names as we're doing the marketing, but just a quick intro to each of them. So first up, Samantha Berg. She is currently the head of design at Chime. Chime is, she's an award-winning design leader, breaking barriers to shape an industry of excellence and equity. She has 15 years of experience building and leading teams within companies of all sizes with proven success. Her teams envision, create, and ship next-generation consumer products that fundamentally change the industry and empower the underrepresented. She's a recipient of many awards, and she creates a culture of equity and inclusion and is an expert on designing your career, creating amazing teams, and using your empower to empower the underrepresented. So welcome, Sam. Right. Next up is Heather Phoenix. She is currently the Vice President of Design and Delivery at Compass Digital Labs. She has an extensive background in technology, given her unique perspective that allows her to truly transform tech teams and grow digital businesses. So currently at CDL, she is focused on building products, processes, and teams that support the digital transformation of Compass dining and services businesses. She has a wealth of experience transforming legacy teams and products where technology tools and structures were not easily found. That is quite the feat. We'll jump into that a little bit more about digital transformations, but welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
Right. Next is April Wilson. April is the head of career services for the Institute for Advanced Analytics at North Carolina State University. She's a career strategist with 20 years of experience identifying and developing talent, and she finds joy in helping people see today how great they can be tomorrow. Welcome, April. All right. And last but certainly not least, Sudha Ayyalasomayajula is currently an insights and data manager at Sogeti. She has 15 years of experience managing complex projects in assorted technical environments. She is an expert in handling and recovering critical and analytical projects through tools and techniques in data science, data visualization, and engineering. So let's give it up for more women in data science. So welcome, Sudha.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much for being here once again. So let's dive in. To set the stage a little bit, I want to define gender bias, also unconscious bias. So gender bias is the tendency to prefer one gender over another. It is a form of unconscious bias or implicit bias, that's another term for it, which occurs when one individual unconsciously attributes certain attitudes or stereotypes to another person or a group of people. But in today's society, gender bias is often used to refer to the preferential treatment men receive in a lot of settings. So whether it's deliberate or unconscious, it is currently holding women back in the workplace. It makes it harder for women to get hired, promoted, and it also negatively impacts their day-to-day work experiences. But in addition to that, I want to give some examples on how this actually manifests. This could be in a classroom setting, this could be in a workplace setting, or even in personal settings when you're in your friend groups or regular conversations. So I'm going to pass that along to Heather. She wants to start off and give a few examples on how it manifests.
Absolutely. So, I think I'm really lucky in that when I look around, many of my meetings around the table or around, a Teams call, I see a lot of women and I see a lot of diversity. And it feels great. But I don't have to go very far outside of my circle for that to really change. We talk to a lot of technology companies, both cutting edge, where you might think that, they're, cutting edge, they're new, and they're going to have more people at the table, or, legacy companies. And when I meet those companies and we're around the table talking, you go look at the About Us page and there are not any women included in those, original founders or the early adopters within that technology. And if there are, the women are maybe in HR. So they're, not in a technology role. They're not in a leader role. They're in what, people would consider a softer role. And I was just looking at statistics in preparation for today, and on LinkedIn, just as of 2017, so maybe a little bit more now, but there were 5% of all of the women, all of the CTOs on LinkedIn were women, just 5%. And of course, from a Fortune 500 perspective, only 8% of Fortune 500 companies have a CEO that's a woman. So, which, by the way, is up significantly from just 4 or 5 years ago when it was a whopping 4% of Fortune 500 companies. So yes, making strides, but that is, we're not seeing a lot of women in those positions. And that itself leads people to think that women can't do those positions because they don't see them in those positions.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. I do want to apologize as I misspoke earlier on your title. So to clarify, Heather is the VP of Digital Delivery and Care at Compass Digital Labs. So it's under the hospitality space, and she does a ton. So we'll get more into that as well. Apologies.
I'll take it.
Awesome. Thank you. So anyone else want to take that question about examples of how it manifests in the workplace? April?
So in our culture here at the Institute, I get the pleasure of seeing both sides. I get to see the student side, and so working with the employers when they're coming in. And then I also get to see the employer side because I'm working with the recruitment team as well as the managers to kind of, to employ the next wave of technology professionals. And here at the Institute, kind of what we're seeing is that there are companies that are really trying. But I see the struggles between the managers who want the best talent, but then I see the HR professionals and the recruitment team trying to help explain that, stereotypically what you have defined as the best talent is no longer what that should actually the title or the definition should be. So where we're seeing what we're trying to do, especially here at the Institute, is we're trying to make sure that we have more women here, we invite more women and admit more women so that employers can see the impact. We are making sure that more women are not only in the forefront, but we have some opportunities for them to serve as leaders on some of our student teams, practicums, where they are working hand in hand with some employers. And so we are hoping what we're doing is kind of changing the idea of what a data scientist or an engineer, what that stereotypically normally looks like in industry. So that's what we're trying to do on our part in the classroom, as well as with the employers.
Thank you, April. All right, next up, Sam. Can you give us a few examples on how it might manifest in an environment, and if it's easiest, maybe in the environment that you work in?
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about something that April mentioned, and it's about hiring. Like, you have to hire completely differently if you're accounting for bias. And it goes back to what Heather was saying about not seeing people, in certain roles or in the industry and feeling like there aren't or there can't be. And so it's really important when you think about hiring that you, at the end of the day, right, you want to have equal representation, whether that's in gender, whether that's in race, whether that's in background. You want to have equal representation kind of at that last part of the interviewing and recruiting process, right? Like at that final round. But what that's going to mean if you're actually serving underrepresented communities or underrepresented genders is you need even more of those folks at the top of the funnel, in like the phone screen stage, in the just reaching out to stage, because especially when folks are, say, reviewing resumes or portfolios, and they see somebody who maybe doesn't have a traditional background or maybe hasn't been afforded all of the opportunities of other folks, they're more likely to weed them out early on. And so it actually is not just about that equal representation at the beginning. You have to be oversubscribing at the beginning to get equal representation at the end. I don't think a lot of people think about that. I also don't think a lot of people think about, to say yes to somebody underrepresented, you have to say no to people who are overrepresented, right? I think people always say like, oh yeah, I want more women on my team, or I want more, I don't know, whatever underrepresented group on my team. But that means consistently saying no to men who are very talented. It means saying no to white people who are very talented, right? And that can be really hard. And it can be a lot of pressure on your shoulders from, I don't know, executive teams from your company to feel like, hey, you have to hire now. Why are you saying no to all these talented, great people? And it's so that we can find the better people who are underrepresented. And so there's a big trade-off there that I don't think we give enough attention to.
Those are great points, Sam. Thank you so much. Both you and April mentioned a few things regarding hiring and what, on the other side, what students could do when they're in situations like this. So we'll get more into that as well. All right, next is Sudha. Anything else you'd like to add to that part?
Yeah, the stereotypically, the women in cultural traditional India are mentioned as a pariah dhan. That means she is owned by someone else. Someone has to come and pick it up or has to get claimed. So even when she is young, she is asked to, cook, clean, or start caring. So the mind is diverted towards those scenarios. So even the birthday gifts are like cooking sets. So let's raise about that. Let's bring more women and stir up. It's not about just cooking, cleaning, or caring about it. They can do much better. So let's come together and make sure that we make them more brave, encourage more, and then we can put forward on her upfront skills. And it's not only that, like even I completely dislike stating women as dependent. And they are much more reliable. They are much more asset oriented. They can make more profits. So it's not only when they were young, even after a certain age also, after they get married. So I feel the woman must be capable enough in their leadership roles, creating an environment where bias-free opinions, thoughts are respected and taken seriously is one of the most productive spaces that I would like to create, and I have been going through as well.
That's great. Thank you, Sudha. So a lot of the soft skills that you mentioned, which are seen when they are given cooking sets as gifts, they have been and always will be transferable into any professional setting. So I think that is the biggest reason that there should be more women in leadership, not just within technology, but within any industry, because those skills aren't specific to one industry. So that's another reason we're having this conversation, right? To make sure that we are in a position for the next generation to have less gender bias in whatever space that you work in. So everyone, as you can tell from the bios that I read earlier, but even just the points that we've made so far, all of these women have a lot of experience building high-performing teams and as well as developing the talent, whether it is coming directly from college or even early stages in their career and developing that talent. So I want to spend a little bit of time in that specific conversation from the employer side as well as from the student side, because we have quite a mix of audience members here, those who are still in high school, who are still in college, or just early in their career. So I want some actionable takeaways for them, especially when they're in these scenarios, how to build the courage to call them out or just identify them in those situations. So Sam, let's go back to you. You mentioned a few things regarding employers, and let's just harp on that a little bit more.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, actually, I almost want to take it a different direction and really try to give some advice to the students and younger women who are listening, if that's cool.
Yep,
but I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give you all is just take up space. Like, it's so interesting to walk into a meeting or a conference room and see the way that men and women act. Like, there's typically, let's say it's a boardroom type thing, right? And there's typically a table and there's some chairs around the table, and then maybe there are chairs kind of around the outside. And part of the like maternal instinct that I think we all have as women, and part of that like caring for others, is we're going to take a seat around the outside because we want somebody else to be able to have a seat at the table, right? But done en masse, like when every single woman does that, it's always going to be men at the table. Right. And the voices on the side of the room are often not heard as much as the voices at the table. So when you walk into that room, go sit at the table and don't apologize about it. Like, don't be afraid to do it. Go sit at the table. The other thing I notice often about men versus women, also in a conference room setting, is how men just like take up space when they sit. Like, they kind of like spread and somehow manage to be huge, you know, and it changes the dynamic in the room, right? It changes the way that people pay attention to them. Women, again, I think it comes from this place of like caring and being conscientious, but we kind of like, we cross our legs, we make ourselves as small as possible. You know, we don't want to like be in anybody else's space. But again, you look around the room and we're just less seen, you know? So sit at the table, take up space. Don't be afraid to take what you need and what you deserve, and don't ever think that you don't deserve those things.
I love it. We should just be doing power poses right now. Just everyone get up and just do a power pose. I love it. Thank you, Sam. That is great advice. And, you know, it sometimes feels easier said than done, but it's always a good reminder to just, it's okay, take up the space. And you don't need the permission to do it, but sometimes we need the refresher for sure. April, let's go back to you, because you are in the career services space and you have so much experience developing the talent. So let's say on advice, just to add on to what Sam has said, but is there anything else you'd like to add, especially what you've seen in your conversations with students?
Yes, absolutely. So once again, like I said, I see it on both sides. And so I kind of give employers advice and I give our students advice too, but, you know, kind of, you know, to work on the employer side and to get them to understand, you know, there are just some key things that need to come into play, and things that I think that as a candidate, when you're looking for jobs, you need to be aware of. You know, we're telling employers now, it's just like Sam said, you have to look beyond the stereotypical candidate. You have to look for that person who may have a unique background, you know, may not have their degree or how they got to where they are, may not have been linear for them. It could have taken several turns, several paths, but they got there, because those turns and paths are things that make them unique, but can make them very, very good and advantageous to your organization. So employers really need to be aware of that. So instead of saying, you know, let me pick my top 2 or 3 candidates, let's stretch it out a little bit. Let's say, let's pick 5. Let's maybe even go up to 10. You know, I know you want that job to be filled, but you want it to be filled with the right person, you know? Some other things that we're stressing for employers is make sure that when you are considering people, that you are looking at the skills and making sure that your assessments are skill-based. You want to be able to look and to compare fairly. So make sure that you're asking everyone the same questions. When you go into those conversations, make sure the people who are asking those questions are diverse, because they're bringing in trying to figure out different things. We also really need to minimize this notion of cultural fit. I think that gets more employers in trouble per se than anything else I've seen, coming from the talent side of the house. I'm not saying that I understand that all it takes is one bad apple to ruin the entire barrel, but you have to be able to define exactly what you mean by cultural fit, and make sure that cultural fit is kind of about the job and not just about you being able to sit down and have a personal conversation with that person.
April, can I like double down on that?
Yes, please do.
I think also when we say culture fit, it assumes that the culture is perfect the way it is and that somebody needs to fit into it, and that we have no intention of making it better or different. Yes. And I hate that. Like when I'm building teams, I think about it as like the shape of the team, and every person who comes in changes the shape in some way. Yes. They push out on this thing or they push out on this thing. And so it's more like you want culture add or culture development, right? And you want to think about not does this person fit, but how does this person fit, or how will they change the shape of the team? It's so important.
I love that, Samantha. Absolutely love that. I think that's the best way to kind of articulate it to managers and make them feel comfortable about that. But one of the biggest things that I'm advocating for is making sure that having representation amongst your company is a bottom line, making sure to put that down, that the higher leadership, hey, if you don't meet your, not quotes, but if you don't meet our goals of having a significant number of people, whether that be gender or racial, whatever that looks like to you, we're taking it out of your pocket. You're not going to get that big bonus that you thought you were going to get. And a lot of times that's going to bring more action than just continuously talking, about things. So those are some of the big key things that I like to kind of push out to employers in regards to things that they can do to make it, to make gender bias disappear ultimately.
Yeah. That is fantastic. Thank you both for those additional comments. It is very true. And I'm sure that even with the pandemic happening, a lot of companies, just from the candidates that I've been speaking to who are interested in working at the company that I do, they are still dealing with a very similar hiring process than to what it was pre-pandemic, even though we're seeing a lot of changes in how candidates want to have the conversation. And not only is the candidate experience poor, it's also, on top of that, it doesn't really mitigate all these other implicit biases that we deal with. So that is fantastic. Thank you so much for adding that. I'm seeing all these comments. Thank you so much. They're loving you guys. All right. On that same topic regarding employing and hiring and building teams, I'm going to ask that same question to Heather and Sudha. So Sudha, do you want to start us off with that? And if there's anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I would want every woman to be a part of it, participate, and initiate the conversation, because communication convincingly is very important. If you start thinking about, oh yes, will I be able to drive my points? That fear will make the gap which the male gender might pull it up. So it's very important for the woman to participate. It's not that they are not encouraged, so it is like evenly distributed, but the thing is they start feeling emotionally, oh yes, can I peep into this? Oh, my communication, will it create an hindrance, or it might be contradictory to the questions? So it is very, very important to be available for the discussions, delivering the outputs, participating, presenting, so that the fear is no more and they can add value to the outputs.
Yes. Thank you, Sudha. That actually reminds me of a statistic. I'm sure you've all have heard this by now, but when a man is looking, or a male is looking for at a job description, they will probably see if they hit 2 or 3 out of the 10 requirements, and they'll go ahead and apply. Whereas women feel like they need to hit 9 out of 10 at least before they feel confident enough to apply. And so that just reminded me of that statistic, because yes, it's a lot of it mitigating the processes that do exist, but also there's a lot of work on our end that we just unfortunately have to do and just push for it. So thank you for that, Sudha. Heather, how about you?
That's funny that you used that statistic. That was exactly what I was going to talk about as well. I was looking at because I know that not only for myself but for women that I have worked with, that statistically it's 60%. So a man will actually apply for a role when they think that they could meet 60% of those requirements, and that a woman is almost 100%, right? So 9 out of 10. And that a lot of people thought when they heard that study originally was that it was because women lacked the confidence. And in fact, when they dug under that in the study, it was actually that women thought it was against the rules. So they literally thought that there would be some kind of repercussion or public failure that, if they were to apply for something that they weren't quite 100% qualified for, they would actually be in trouble. And I think that that's really important. I mean, we've taught women for years. We start really young. It's like to be good and follow the rules. And in fact, they're not even like when we're hiring, they're like the old rules don't exist anymore. And we definitely, as women, need to be breaking the rules more. And that's going to probably feel really uncomfortable. But that's in fact what we need to do, is because if you wait to feel confident, you're going to wait decades. Like, forget it. Like, I mean, there are things I still don't feel confident about, and would be like, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. So I'm never going to wait for that. I have to just do it anyway and break the rules. Like, doesn't stop me from applying. It's me that is actually stopping me from applying, or networking with somebody about that role, or talking with another person. And so I think that's really important, is don't always, just because it says that you need all those qualifications doesn't mean that you actually need them all. Sometimes our job descriptions are aspirational. Like, we'd love it if someone had all of these qualifications, did all of this. And, so we should put ourselves out there a lot more.
I have two things I want to double down on there. I'll start with the last piece you just said, which is when we're writing job descriptions, stop writing aspirational job descriptions. That introduces bias, because women are not going to apply. When you're writing a job description, pick the 3 things that somebody absolutely has to have, stick those in the job description, get rid of the rest. It's fluff and it's getting in the way. So Heather, I love that you brought that up. And for anybody who is a hiring manager or works in recruiting, this is so, so important. I got so excited about that I lost my train of thought. I'm trying to remember what the other thing was that you said that I really wanted to double down on. Oh, it was the networking piece. Women are also afraid to network. For roles, we're afraid to ask for recommendations or referrals. We're afraid to ask people hey, do you know somebody at this company? Women tend to just apply and hope for the best. And again, it goes back to my original statement, take up space, go after what you need, break the rules. It is so, so important. It's so important.
Yes, to add, Sam, a little bit more, I was personally very much afraid to ask for the long distance conferences, events as well, because it was told to me, oh, you cannot go, you cannot do, but I did it. I went to UK, I went to US, I went to various other places. And when my younger, my colleagues, my peers, they checked out with me, how could you do that? Did you impress? It's not about the impress. Be a part, participate. It is a must to speak up. You have to show your desire. Yes, I can do it. I can present well. I can go do some things and I can get the projects. So it is very important to communicate convincingly. Yes, that networking is must. So you have to start socializing. Come what may, you have to do that. Yes.
And it's interesting. I think I want to say it was Priya who I saw a comment pop up on the screen that really gets into the double bind, right? Which is women acting confident or outspoken can be seen as trying too hard, can be seen as aggressive. Oh my God, you all, the number of times I've been called aggressive in my lifetime, or bossy. Those are terms now I love. You know what? Yep. Intimidating is one. Those terms are emotions that somebody else is feeling. that they have placed on you, that's their problem. That is not your problem. Don't get me wrong. It sometimes becomes our problem, right? When those things kind of hold us back from promotions, whatever it is. But I've been told so many times that I'm intimidating. And my favorite way to turn that around is like, you are intimidated by me. That's on you.
Yeah.
You know? And like, I think we have to lean into that stuff as hard as it is. I think we have to lean into that stuff, but it is the classic double bind, right? Like you speak up, you're intimidating. You don't speak up, you don't get what you need. If you're going to be damned either way, you might as well do the thing that gets you what you need.
Break the rules, right? Like, I mean, right, if you're going to be intimidating and aggressive, then I mean, like, okay, I guess I am. So I too, we're in the same bucket there. And I think that within companies, it's really important to acknowledge and recognize that we tell women all the time, we want you to be assertive and we want you to be confident. But but then what happens is they get dinged for being too aggressive or, being too bossy. Or we tell them that we want you to be communal and collaborative. And then they're looked at as, those are not leadership qualities. Like people who are focused on what do you all need and what do you all want and how do we do this together are immediately taken down a peg or two within organizations and not seen as somebody who is taking charge and leading a group. So those are mixed messages, 100%, that we are sending our own teams and, that happen every day. And we need to acknowledge that. I mean, just being aware of it and acknowledging it and talking about it brings it forward and means that we're all paying attention to it a little bit differently. It means, it's not, it's just not unspoken. Like someone's talking about it, someone's raising it up. So, puts it out in the atmosphere.
That is great. So to recap, employers, cut down your job descriptions. You don't need 15 bullet points. All right, don't do all that. But other things include send that email, ask for that advocate, grab a seat at the table, power pose it if you need to. But that's what was just said in the last 5-10 minutes. So thank you for all of that. Actually, something that was just mentioned, I think it was Sam and Heather who both pointed it out, is about speaking up. But my question here is a young professional or someone who's about to graduate, or just someone who's very early in their career, who's dealing with imposter syndrome. How can they call it out? How do they build up the courage to call it out or even identify it in the first place? And that could be in any of the examples that you've given so far, or maybe you have an anecdote that you'd like to share regarding. So I'd open that up to anyone.
So I've got a couple of things. Me and one of my partner that works in career services with me, we talk about this all the time. And she says this word, and I'm like, I love it. She says, find your tribe. And, pretty much what that means is surround yourself. And now when I say surround yourself, I don't mean 20 or 30 people, but surround yourself with people who are like you, but not like you, people that are different from you, so that you can always get a different perspective. And, someone who's always going to tell you the truth but the truth that's good for you, to kind of say, well, you were kind of wrong in that meeting. Maybe you shouldn't have said this. And there's someone saying, no, you were right. And I see exactly where you were coming from. I think that gives us strength, and that gives us, people to kind of bounce our ideas off of. And second, I would also say I'm very firm about knowing when you come to the table, know what you're talking about. So educate yourself. Don't go into these situations necessarily with emotions. Go into these situations with facts. I think that when you go into a situation with facts and you've practiced this, you've ran this by people and trust, you feel a little bit more confident when you are there and the spotlight is on you to kind of say, this is the way it is. And, especially in the interviewing process, I speak to a lot of students and I ask them, did you ask this question or did you feel empowered? Or they may say, well, they asked me, am I married or do I have a significant other? You need to know what's legal and what is illegal, to be asked. And you need to have the power enough to say, I'm sorry, if you don't mind explaining to me how that's relevant to the position. If it is, I'm happy to answer it. But if it's not, then, if you don't mind explaining that information to me. So, education, leads to empowerment. And when you're empowered, you're able to do a lot of things that originally you were not able to do. So those are two big suggestions that come from me.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think that when I think about imposter syndrome, and and suffer from it now and suffered from it for years, you just have to. It doesn't matter. It's like, so what? So what? It's like you feel like an imposter doesn't actually mean you are an imposter. With April talking about facts, it's like, yeah, so it's a feeling. It's not a fact. I do know this role, this action, these details, and I have to just act as if I am in fact not an imposter. I have to act as if I have confidence and I deserve a seat at this table. And so just because I feel like I'm an imposter doesn't actually mean that I am one. And that's a really important thing for me to remember all the time when I feel like I don't deserve the spot or the seat. And that it's like, well, why not? Why not me? Like, why, it's like, X, Y, and Z, why not? So, and no one, not a lot of other people are going to tell you, how awesome you are all the time. It's probably not going to even be enough. If there are times when it's been like, really, hard thinking about, I don't deserve to be here or this role. Whatever somebody else tells me isn't going to necessarily get me over that hump. I'm going to need a lot more than anybody's going to be able to give. And that's not their job. That's my job. So I need to just act as if and keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you think you're an imposter doesn't mean you are. Just have to remind yourself that you know more than you think you do. And remind yourself every day if you have to, before every meeting even. Great. Thank you so much.
I feel believing in our skills is more important. Like, we have to be. Let's not be judgmental about what others are speaking, what others are doing. Let's have faith in ourselves first.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. So in some cases, more often than not, though, women are known for not always lending a hand and seeing other women as competition, which is a direct result of gender bias, another reason we're here right now. So how can someone in this situation handle bias from other women? And it doesn't have to be something as direct in a meeting setting. It could even just be in the implicit side of it, unconsciously they're doing it. So Sam, would you like to start us off with this one?
Sure. Women are really mean to each other. I don't understand why. And we seem to learn it so young. Yeah. It's like the 8, 9-year-old girls who are all of a sudden being really bratty to each other. And I don't get it. But I do think that a lot of this comes out of, it almost goes back to what Heather was saying at the beginning, right? We don't see a lot of women at the top, especially. And it makes us then believe that there can only be one. And so we all start competing. And that's not good for anybody. When we compete, we make each other, there's friendly competition, right? But when we're competing in a not nice way, we're making other women look bad, which does not further the cause of women at all. And we're subscribing to the belief that there can and should only be one, which is absolutely absurd. It should be all of them, every single one, And so I think we all just, as women, have to remember that a rising tide lifts all boats. We need to make each other look good. We need to make each other look better. We need to support each other, help each other get there. That is more of a proactive stance than a reactive stance to somebody who is acting with bias against you, especially another woman. And I mean, there's no silver bullet to solving that, but I think you call it out, and this is just my philosophy with any kind of bad behavior that I see from somebody. When I feel tension, when I feel something's going on, I try to just ask about it and ask about it with curiosity, but hey, I noticed you were interrupting me a bunch of times in that meeting. Is there something going on? Can we talk about it? And I think usually you figure out maybe that person was just having a bad day and what you thought was bias actually wasn't. It had nothing to do with you being a woman. Just happened that, X, Y, Z. Or, you get into a tougher conversation and maybe you help somebody understand where they have, bias that they're not recognizing. But I don't know. I never see anything wrong with calling it out. And I think the hardest part about implicit bias is the idea that it's implicit, right? Or it's unconscious. And so the only way to recognize it is to call it out and call it out. And when you're sick of calling it out, you do it some more.
Exactly. Call it out. Call it out. All right. Anyone else want to add to that question?
I thought about this question a lot, and my first thought was, we're having a conversation about about gender bias. We've already talked about during even this conversation about the lack of women in certain roles, and just percentages of women in these roles. So in fact, in my career, like, my barriers haven't been because other women were being mean to me or had a bias, in fact, against me, or even implicit bias. Like, the bias generally is very large. It's in fact the men in roles, because they are in fact the majority within a population. And so I've had great experiences with women, and women being supportive when they haven't been having those really tough conversations. That's part of being in the technology space and doing what we do, is that sometimes you have to have those crucial conversations. And I love turning somebody into a fan, like so having a struggle with someone, and then you have that tough conversation, and you realize, like, wait a second, we're coming from the same root, and there was a general misunderstanding. But I think it's really important that men, like, women aren't going to be able to move ahead in our industries and generally by helping each other, because we're not in those positions of power yet, and we're not in the majority stake of positions. And so it actually is men that have to take the actions, that men have to acknowledge and recognize what it is that they might need to be different in their environments. So are they promoting women? Are they being champions, not just mentoring, but really being champions of women, moving into roles, or being in a role that is traditionally a male-dominated role? Are they breaking their own bias and paying attention to their own unconscious bias? And and then of course, I'm totally biased against myself. So we've already talked about our imposter syndrome. So I'm probably the worst woman in my life, and like, unhelpful person. So those barriers have been myself too, and holding myself back, not going for something that's 100%, or feeling like I couldn't do something until I was perfect at it. So I think that my experience with women in the space has been incredible, and in fact, there's more work, I think, for other people to do than us. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Sudha?
Yeah, I would like to say that one factor which I have experienced is more about jealous. Um, like, women starts, like, it is not majorly, probably this might be one of the thinking that we might be carrying, that somebody is jealous of us, or I might be jealous of us. But I think, as Samantha said, it is important to go ask, like, how, yeah, is this right? Why are you interrupting me? Or what is happening? Like, what's the scenario? So we would have to focus more about the things that we start thinking. So it's not that actually they are not lending the hand. It's more about, again, I come back to the same point, having a comfort level of communication and talking to them. So if you'll communicate, I think the paths will be more easier, and you can just flow in that directions. So there was a one time where I have taken a break. So people start wondering, oh, she has taken a break, then why she is given more better opportunity? It's not about that. It's more about the communication, the way we put ourselves in front and not holding us back. So we have to be more available and more flexible to do more things. So that's what I feel about it.
Thank you, Sudha. And April.
So, what I think about is, as women, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And, sometimes that means having conversations with people who we thought maybe should be our advocates, but then we find out maybe they're not. I think back to what is going on with this pandemic. And the biggest thing that I think issue that our team has had coming back is there are a subset of individuals who, came back to the office way quicker than some other folks. And, some of the other people maybe didn't want to come back, different reasons, but, a lot of time, several of the women didn't want to come back because they had families and they didn't want to get their families sick. And they knew that, maybe they were the only ones that came out, whatever that was. And, there were several times where I just kind of never shook up anything. But this was one time I think being, at the pandemic, working on my own, I figure out something different about who I was, and a power, came within me. And so the first time I remember coming back to the office and somebody coming and saying like, "Oh, nice to see you here." And my response was, "Well, I am so happy that you acknowledge the fact that I'm here. I really appreciate that. I see that you missed me, and you should have, because I am a big impact to this organization." And it was like, wrong thing to say to April. Yeah, that was the wrong thing to say to April, because it's none of your business, because the boss told me I could work remotely. He advocated for it. He's working remotely. Why is it any business of yours? And so, like I said, I put myself in a situation where I was uncomfortable. But then after I said it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have the power. I can say things. I can advocate for myself, and I don't have to be afraid. But you don't have to say it in a mean or nasty way. But you can say it in a way that's impactful, that make people really step back and really think about what they say before they say it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. That is very impactful. I would think twice if I said something like that ever again. Thank you all so much. I actually have one more question before we switch it over to Q&A. And again, anyone can take this, but let's go on the positive side a little bit. So breaking biases, and Break the Bias is the International Women's Day theme for this year, which is, again, the point of today's conversation. But breaking the bias comes in many forms. So what are some impactful moments you've experienced or have seen that highlight how others have done their part to break stereotypes, regardless of their level, their gender, in any scenario? I guess start with Sam.
I'm the wrong person to start with. I was thinking about my answer.
We can come back. It's totally fine. Heather?
Thanks. This one, was oddly difficult. So I was thinking about this, and I really struggled with coming up with which says a lot. Like, where have I really seen a lot of people breaking barriers and having it be impactful? And I was late last night. I had the aha moment. And it was years ago. I was being promoted. I had won a new role, and I was not the easy candidate. Like, I was not the easy choice for this role. The role was going to be way bigger. Was like a big jump up. And there were other people that were better papered and had better educations and had the same parts as my promoting manager. But I was the one, I was the one that was picked and was going. And that was very much, right before actually I was moving across country for this role. The person who was going to be my new, was my hiring manager and, was my promoting manager, said, "I'm not going to be there. So you're going to take this role, but I'm not going to be there. I'm taking a different role. And you're absolutely still going to do this. You're going to be great at this role, and you can do this without me, and get on the plane." And I did. And for him, that was not only did he pick somebody who was not the easy one for the the sort of the easy choice for the role, but for him as well, he was not known for saying really nice, supportive, coaching things. He was definitely not known for that. He was a hatchet man. And I went, and I did great at that job. I loved that role. And it was absolutely, something that I could do. And he showed me, he was, one of those times where he showed me confidence, and championed me, where I couldn't do it for myself yet. And it was a huge leap for me forward.
Yes, that is fantastic.
I can come back now. Because that last piece, Heather, that you were saying is it's so important to find people who are not just going to champion you, but who are willing to take risks for you, right? And I like to think about it as not an ally or an advocate, but an accomplice, because accomplice is the word that says, hey, you're putting something on the line, right? Like there's something at risk here. You telling that story made me think about a time, this must have been, 10 plus years ago. I was younger, but I have a baby face. So I look really young. So I looked even younger 10 years ago. And I was leading a project with a client, and they were a family owned and run business that had been in business for a long time and was somewhat, I think, traditional and stereotypical and passed down from man to man to man, for the most part. And we went into the first meeting, and it was all men in the room. And they were clearly not prepared to see a young woman running the project. So I had both gender and age going against me at this point. And the first meeting or two were super rough. And they did not really want to listen to anything I had to say, whether or not I knew what I was talking about. They just weren't interested. They felt like they'd gotten the short end of the stick, right? They'd gotten the C team put on their project. And they very much gave that feedback to the consulting company that I was working for at the time. And the company could have taken me off the project and said, you know what, just not a good fit with this client. And they didn't. They kind of said, they came to me and said, are you comfortable? Do you want to keep going? I said, I'm good. I'm going to kill this project, and they're like, okay, great, go nuts, and they supported me. And I think, Heather, you were also saying, or maybe it was April, that you really love turning people into taking haters and turning them into, your big fans. By the end of this project, these guys loved me and they loved the work, and it was uncomfortable, but it was also really empowering in that moment to know that my company was going to stand behind me, and they knew I was the right person for the job, and they weren't going to let, this client kind of change that. So that's my story.
That's a great story. Thank you. April.
So, I would say my story is not per se about me. It's actually about, my current, where I work currently. Our executive director is a male, and he never ceased to amaze me on a daily basis, to be honest with you. Some of the things he says, some are good, some are bad. He knows I love him. But, one of the things I think I'm most proud of is the fact that, he has become a huge advocate for women, and, and he looks to other women on his leadership team for advice. And something that, he does that stands out to me for the women in our program is that all the students are supposed to report their offers. As you get an offer, you report that you have an offer, and you report the salary. He is the only person who sees those salaries, and he does not share them with individuals per se. But what he tends to do is he will periodically send out reports to the students to say, this is the average salary. This is where the women are. This is where the men are. And every year since he has started this, we have found out that every year the women have been anywhere from $100 to $200 more than the men. And I think that it's given women a power just to know it's only $100 or $200, but to know that, they are seen as valuable in the industry. I think it helps them to go into these jobs knowing that the companies that they are working for actually see, look at this as an advantage of hiring them. And I think it was a great power move. I really was. It, like I said, it helps him to see, A, that we advocate for the students, B, that we really do take this data seriously, and we're just not using it for just any old reasons, but C, just every few weeks throwing that out there for those students, especially the women that don't have jobs yet. It gives them a breath of fresh air to know that, okay, I didn't get my job 3 weeks ago and I thought all the good jobs are gone, but no, I'm seeing the women are still in the lead. So I'm in this. And it's just, to me, it's very powerful. And it's such a very small thing that he does that, helps to take the students to a different level, take the female students to a different level. It's also a very powerful tool when we end up recruiting too. So, I commend him for that. I think that's a very good move.
Oh, that's great. Seeing the data and applying it and actually seeing the change of that data. You need to share that report. I see Winnie's commenting here. Send that report to everyone.
I can do that. We have it. It's 14 pages. You got to read everything now.
Fine. Thank you, April. And last but not least, Sudha, on this question.
I feel miracles just don't happen. Like, it is the huge hard work that we put inside. The more passionate we are, the things are on the paper. It is the proofs that everybody can see, actually. It's not about the gender bias or males are doing good or females, but the passion towards the work skills, the analysis, the detailed output deliveries will definitely put ourselves out of the box. It's not just like a ballot box voting, like she must get it or he must get it. It's more about the recognition that we get it. So that stereotype has made me come out of the box over the years. So the opportunities whenever I fail, like, when I was not able to, when I was pregnant or there was a family building, I always took that opportunity by my supporting husband, that go up and start educating yourselves, get certified. I did those kind of things and it led to me more and more. And that swing is really great. So people will recognize you someday or the other. So it is definite. Just keep working hard, because the opportunities just doesn't come are at the doors and they just don't knock it. Like, we have to find it on each and every opportunity that we get. So that's what I feel is more powerful, and that has empowered me a lot, actually.
Thank you, Sudha. I love all of the stories that you've shared and the feedback and the tips and advice. Apologies, I did underestimate the time for the Q&A, but I did see two come in. I'll give one to one and the other to the other. One of the questions, actually, I'm going to pick on Kaylin. Kaylin is our awesome communications lead on the digital page team. She had a question before we were kicking off the event, but hers was around the gender pay gap. So it's highlighted up here. There's always a stigma around talking about paychecks and individual wages. However, I saw a post where one woman helped their female coworker who was getting 20% less than her because they spoke about it. So, April, I'm going to give this one to you. Any thoughts on this one?
Oh, wow. That's a powerful one. Like I said, being on the student side so much, that's one of the reasons why we advocate for that information, so that we can advocate for the students beforehand. I have been the person who has had to, we've had an employer come and give different people different offers. And like I said, my director kind of gives me that information and I have to have that conversation with because he wants to understand. Like, if it's because of something very specific, but he's like, I know these students, I'm looking at the resumes, I see it, there shouldn't be a $10,000 gap that I can tell, even if they didn't communicate as well as the other, they gave them the job, they're offering them the job. So I don't understand why there should be a gap. So I've had to have some interesting conversations with management and with the recruiters, just to kind of ask, why that comes into play. And it's sad to say, but after they were called on it, all of a sudden, sometimes these people got the pay bump. So I do think there was bias behind it. But a lot of times I think what I'm finding is that some of our female students are talking themselves down or saying, I'm willing to accept less if I can have that, or I know that you guys have a great work-life balance and that I can do this. So I'm okay with accepting less. Or, they didn't push where my male students do. They do. They advocate for themselves. And, the male students sometimes are willing to hold and walk away, whereas my female students are not so much. They kind of feel like, I've got this one opportunity. It's a great opportunity. I'm going to stick with it no matter what. And sometimes we just have to have that conversation, like, like we always tell students, if someone doesn't want to hire you because of your race or your religion or your gender, is that really the place you want to work for? And so sometimes we have to have that same conversation with our women about, if they're not willing to pay you the same as your counterpart, is that really the place you really want to work for? Let's talk through this. But you do have to kind of communicate that. My thing is just to communicate it with the right person. If you hear, I feel like if you hear that you're being underpaid, I think trying to figure out who the right person to talk to about that is the best course of action. Maybe that's your HR person. Maybe that's your manager. Sometimes just calling it to your manager's attention, it makes them go, oh wow, I didn't think about that. Or you're up for promotion. You know, it gives you something, but you have to start off by having the right conversation with the right people. To me, with necessarily having it with a lot of coworkers, it actually kind of creates a problem that doesn't help. But if you find out something that you're uncomfortable with, like with anything else, I think just, having a meeting with your manager, but coming to it with facts, I think that helps out tremendously.
Absolutely. Thank you, April. I really appreciate that thoughtful answer. And sometimes you won't know any of these things until you have those conversations. And even if it's not with your coworkers, to talk about it with your friends. And even if you're in different industries, some things will come up that need to be addressed. They'll make you think. Women supporting women is beautiful. We go further together. So unfortunately, we can't get to the other ones, but thank you all so much for your questions. But panelists, thank you so much for your thoughtful, honest answers here. And of course, I didn't do justice to your experience at the beginning with the intros, but check out these women and see what they're doing in the industries that they're in. They are doing amazing work. So thank you. I'm actually going to pass it off to Amita. We are going to do the Spotlight Lunch giveaway. It's going to take about 30 more seconds, so stick around and you'll have the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with one of these amazing women.
Thank you, Rashmili, and thank you so much to our panelists. I know we've gone over, so for those of you that have stuck with us, thank you to our panelists. A huge thank you. I wish we could have scheduled this for 2 hours because you just had a ton of information, and I gleaned a lot of value out of it as well. So as promised, we do have a Spotlight Lunch to give away, and to save time, I'm not going to share my screen, but NV from our chat, if you can, please reach out to me because you are the winner of today's Spotlight Lunch. As promised, you'll get a $20 gift card to cover the cost of that lunch, as well as your choice of one of our amazing panelists to get a 1-hour conversation with them. For everybody else, please stay in touch with Digital Page. We have amazing events like this. I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Social media really is our primary channel to get a lot of these great opportunities out to you guys and connect you with amazing leaders like we had today. So really appreciate everybody's time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
Thank you.